By the ninth morning, every horse team in Potter County had failed. 3 farm families had no firewood. A boy with a crushed leg was losing feeling in his foot. Snow had buried the wagon tracks, frozen the wells, and turned the open prairie into a white emptiness where a man could walk 20 yards from his own door and never find his way back. Only one kind of animal was still willing to move. 13 remained from the 14 scarred, mismatched mules the men in Amarillo had called useless 3 weeks earlier. And they belonged to Beatrice Hale, the widow those same men had expected to lose her ranch before spring. Calvin Roe stood at her supply barn with ice on his beard and fear where his pride usually lived. "My wife cannot breathe," he said. "I need your team." Behind him, families waited for flour, medicine, lamp oil, and news. Beatrice looked past Roe toward the north, where the wind had erased the horizon. She remembered the laughter at the auction. She remembered Roe offering half what she had paid, calling it charity. She remembered telling him the mules might save him. Now the storm had come to collect that promise. Beatrice pulled on her gloves. "6 mules," she said. "You ride beside me, and you do exactly what I tell you." Roe lowered his eyes. "All right." 3 weeks earlier, the winter livestock sale had ended in mud and cold. The good horses sold first. Young teams went to freight companies. Heavy draft animals went to ranches with money. By late morning, only a crooked row of mules remained behind the far rail. Some were old. Some were ugly. One had a torn ear. Another carried a white scar across her nose. A small brown mule leaned away whenever a man touched the harness near her flank. The gray mare at the end stood with her head low and watched every hand that came near. The auctioneer tried to sell them in pairs. No one bid. He tried single lots. No one bid. Then Beatrice raised her hand. The laughter began before the clerk finished repeating her name. Beatrice was 39, broad-shouldered, heavy through the hips, and strong enough to lift a feed sack without asking a man to make a performance of helping her. Amarillo had never forgiven her for taking up space without apology. Nathan Hale had been dead 6 months. Since the funeral, men who had called her capable while he lived had begun speaking slowly around her, as though widowhood had damaged her hearing and arithmetic at the same time. Calvin Roe leaned against the rail. 14 mules, he called. "You opening a circus? Planning to work? With those?" A cattle buyer near the gate grinned. "Maybe the widow needs a husband more than animals." Beatrice waited for the laughter to finish. Then she faced the auctioneer. "What is the lot price?" The auctioneer named a number low enough to embarrass the seller and high enough to make the crowd laugh again. Beatrice bought all 14. While the clerk counted her money, Roe stepped close enough that only the men nearest them could hear. "I will take them off your hands for half," he said. "You can call it charity. Charity is given to someone who asks." He glanced at the gray mare. That one threw 3 drivers. Beatrice walked to the animal and stopped beyond the reach of her hind feet. She did not grab the halter. She let the mule smell her glove, then rested one hand against the thick winter hair on her neck. The mare stayed still. "What is her name?" Beatrice asked the seller. "Does not have one." "She does now." "Mercy." Roe shook his head. "Buying mules will not save that ranch." Beatrice looked at him beneath the brim of her hat. "No," she said. "But they might save you." The crowd enjoyed that answer because they thought it was a joke. Beatrice led Mercy from the pen. The others followed in a crooked line, stubborn, scarred, and steady enough to pass through the gate without breaking a trace. The laughter followed them onto the North Road. 7 years earlier, Beatrice had arrived in the Texas Panhandle with one trunk and a reply to a marriage advertisement folded inside her glove. She was the eldest of 4 daughters in an Ohio family that had always needed her labor and rarely considered what she might need in return. People praised the bread she baked, the children she carried, and the work she finished before other women had begun. At church socials, men thanked her for serving supper and asked smaller women to dance. Nathan Hale's advertisement requested patience, bookkeeping skill, practical judgment, and a willingness to live far from town. It said nothing about beauty. That was the first description of a wife Beatrice had ever read that seemed to ask for qualities she actually possessed. The advertisement exaggerated the ranch. When she reached Texas in 1881, she found thin cattle, a broken windmill, a cabin leaning into the wind, and Nathan trying not to cough blood into a handkerchief. He showed her the guest cot, the pantry, and the cracked pump. Then he pointed toward the road. "The return stage leaves Thursday," he said. "I will pay the fare if you want it." Beatrice looked at the failing ranch and the embarrassed man standing beside it. "Your advertisement said you needed someone practical. I did not realize practical women were this difficult to scare." They married 2 weeks later. Nathan was not a romantic man in public. He forgot birthdays, burned coffee, and once bought Beatrice a new set of gate hinges for Christmas. But he never treated her work as help. It was their ranch, their debt, their herd, and their decision. When a rancher joked that Nathan would need a draft horse to carry his bride, Nathan answered without raising his voice. "A draft horse could not carry half what she does." The joke ended around him. It continued when he was absent. Together, they rebuilt Hale Ranch. Beatrice kept the accounts, treated animals, repaired harness, and studied the weather. Her father had driven freight through Kansas and taught her to watch what newspapers and telegraph reports missed: the direction cattle faced before a storm, the depth of prairie dog burrows, the timing of birds leaving a field, and the particular silence that sometimes came before deadly cold. Nathan trusted what she saw. During his final winter, he became too weak to ride. Beatrice negotiated cattle sales, dismissed a dishonest foreman, and managed every hand on the place. When 2 buyers refused to deal with a woman, Nathan summoned them to his bedroom. "If you cannot conduct business with my wife," he told them, "you cannot conduct business with this ranch." After he died, those same men behaved as though his confidence had been buried with him. The bank questioned every figure. Suppliers demanded payment early. Ranch hands received offers from neighboring properties. 3 left before the first frost. In September, the bank manager summoned Beatrice to Amarillo and placed Nathan's original loan on the desk. The final payment was due in March. "You could sell now and leave with something," he said. Beatrice opened her ledger. "The herd is smaller, but the debt is smaller too. I have hay, winter stores, and contracts for spring calves. You have no husband signing beside you. He is dead. The numbers are not." The manager gave her until March, partly because he doubted her and partly because foreclosure before winter would leave the bank responsible for cattle it did not know how to feed. Beatrice left with the loan unchanged, and one more reason the ranch could not survive an ordinary mistake. Eli Mercer stayed. He had been 15 when Beatrice caught him stealing biscuits from the kitchen. Instead of calling the sheriff, she fed him, learned that his mother was dead and his father had disappeared, then offered him work cleaning stalls. At 22, Eli could read a weather vane, repair a wagon axle, and sleep through almost any noise except a calf in trouble. "You should go where the wages are safer," Beatrice told him after the other hands left. "You fed me before asking my name. That is not a business reason. It is mine." June Bell stayed too. She was 17, the daughter of Hale Ranch's cook, and better with harness than any man Beatrice had hired. June had grown up watching teamsters repair leather and had learned by copying their hands when they assumed she was only playing. Beatrice gave her the work because she was good at it. Men from neighboring ranches called that another sign the widow had lost judgment. Together, Beatrice, Eli, June, and an older hand named Frank Willis counted every bale, calf, fence post, sack of beans, lamp wick, and dollar. Hale Ranch had enough to survive one ordinary winter. Beatrice was certain the coming winter would not be ordinary. She kept weather journals in a locked drawer beneath the account books. Every morning she recorded temperature, wind, cloud shape, moisture in the grass, animal behavior, and anything unusual enough to remember. Nathan had teased her during the first year. By the third year, her notes predicted storms more accurately than reports arriving by telegraph. In November 1887, the entries began to disturb her. Birds left earlier than usual. Coyotes moved south. Horses grew heavy coats before the first hard frost. Mice crowded into feed sheds. Prairie dogs closed burrows on the north side of their towns. High clouds stretched thin across the horizon for days at a time. The signs resembled stories her father told about the winter of 1864, when freight teams froze along the Kansas Trail. Beatrice rode from ranch to ranch warning neighbors. Some listened politely and did nothing. Most laughed after she left. Marta Sims listened. She bought flour, lamp oil, and extra stovepipe without telling her husband why. When he discovered the supplies, he mocked her until the first storm broke their chimney and filled the house with smoke. The stored lamp oil kept one room warm while he repaired the pipe from inside the attic. After the thaw, he brought a sack of flour to Hale Ranch. "I owe you this," he said. "You owe your wife an apology." Marta stood beside him. "He already gave me one." It was poorly worded, but recognizable. Beatrice accepted the flour for the emergency store. Calvin Roe did not listen. He owned the largest ranch in the county and believed size was evidence of judgment. In October, he offered 1/3 of Hale Ranch's value. "You cannot run it alone," he said. "I have been running it for 6 years. Your husband handled the men. My husband handled men who needed handling." Roe smiled as though patience were something he granted her. "Winter will change your mind." Beatrice thought winter would change somebody's mind. She did not yet know whose. She cut more hay than neighbors considered reasonable. She reinforced barn doors, lowered emergency feed into the root cellar, stored beans, flour, salt, bandages, lamp oil, and spare harness leather. She tied bright cloth around fence posts near the house so a rope line could be strung quickly in heavy snow. Then she attended the January livestock sale and bought every mule no one wanted. Mules needed less feed than horses of similar working size. They watched the ground. They resisted panic. They also refused bad commands with a stubbornness men often mistook for stupidity. Beatrice had driven freight mules with her father. She knew stubbornness could be a form of judgment. The 14 animals did not become a team simply because she paid for them. One kicked whenever a trace chain touched her flank. Another refused bridges. Mercy would cross deep mud but stop dead if a driver raised his voice. The smallest mule, a brown mare June named Button, walked calmly beside nervous animals and settled them faster than any whip could. For 10 days, Beatrice and June worked the mules in pairs. Eli kept records. They began with empty sleds, then sacks of sand, then water barrels. They changed partners until they knew which animals could pull together and which would fight the harness. Men passing the North Road shouted advice. "Put wheels under the widow next. Those animals will eat the ranch before snow comes." June flushed the first time. Beatrice handed her a lead rope. "Let them spend breath," she said. "We have work." On the 8th day, a harness buckle failed. A loaded sled slid backward toward June. Mercy braced. Button turned sideways. The team held long enough for Eli to jam a log behind the runner. No one was hurt. Beatrice replaced every buckle that afternoon, including the ones that looked sound. The practice cost grain, leather, and time. It also meant that when the storm arrived, no one had to discover in white darkness which animals trusted one another. 2 days before the weather changed, the sky turned the color of old iron. No birds moved. Mercy stood in the south corner of the corral and refused to face north. Beatrice ordered every animal brought close to shelter. She moved cattle into a protected draw, filled indoor water barrels, and sent Eli to town with written notices. Calvin Roe read his at the mercantile. "You expect men to move 10,000 cattle because a mule turned her head? I expect them to decide what they can afford to lose." Roe tore the paper in half. That evening, Beatrice walked the barns herself. She checked ropes, feed, blankets, axes, shovels, medicine, and lanterns. Frank Willis admitted his old hip would not hold a saddle if the temperature fell too far. "You are in charge of stores," Beatrice said. "I can still work." That is work. 2 hired men announced they were leaving for Roe Ranch before the storm. Eli called them cowards. Beatrice paid what they were owed and opened the gate. "You need every hand," Eli said after they left. "I need hands that will stay after the wind rises." At midnight, the north wind changed. The temperature dropped 30 degrees before dawn. The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like a wall. Snow entered through cracks no one knew existed. Doors froze shut. Cattle broke fences in panic. The rope Beatrice strung from the house to the barn vanished beneath blowing white within minutes, but it remained the only safe path between them. By morning, the world beyond the windows had disappeared. The first storm lasted 18 hours. The cold deepened after the snow stopped. Before ranchers recovered, a second front struck and erased the work of the first day. Horse teams began refusing the open road. Hale Ranch lost cattle, but fewer than expected. The protected draw held. Roe Ranch lost more than 200 head in one night. On the third day, a boy arrived on foot with ice frozen across his scarf. His father had been crushed when a barn roof collapsed. His mother and 2 sisters were trapped 6 miles away without firewood. Beatrice harnessed 4 mules. Eli looked through the open doorway at the white wind. The road is gone. The road is under the snow. That is the same thing. No. One means we stop. The other means we find it. June checked every buckle twice. Frank packed splints, blankets, lamp oil, and a coil of rope. Beatrice tied one end around her waist and the other to the wagon. The mules moved slowly. Where horses would have lunged into drifts, they tested each step. Button found firmer ground along a fence line buried beneath the snow. Mercy stopped twice, forcing Beatrice to probe ahead with a pole before discovering washouts hidden under the crust. They reached the family before dark. Beatrice set the father's leg, loaded the children into the wagon, and brought everyone back to Hale Ranch. The mother cried when she saw the barn lanterns through the snow. News traveled faster than any team. The next morning, a rancher came for medicine. Another needed flour. The telegraph operator reported a stagecoach missing east of town. It carried a doctor, a driver, 2 passengers, and a pregnant woman whose child was not due until spring. Its last known position was 9 miles from the station. Beatrice chose Mercy, Button, and 2 of the strongest mules. June drove. Eli packed a shovel, blankets, lamp oil, hot bricks, and more rope than Beatrice requested. They found the coach tipped against a drift after dark. The driver had broken 2 ribs. One passenger had wandered out looking for help and left tracks already filling with snow. Beatrice wanted to load the injured first and search at daylight. Mercy turned her head south and refused to face the road home. June studied the mule, then the scrub beyond the coach. She hears something. They followed Mercy through low brush until the rope line pulled tight. The missing passenger lay behind a bank, alive but unable to stand. On the return, the pregnant woman began having pains. The doctor said the contractions were early and probably brought on by cold. Beatrice gave up her own blanket and rode beside the wagon, holding the woman's hand whenever the wheels struck hidden ground. The child was not born that night. Months later, the family named the girl Mercy. By the 5th day, Hale Ranch had become the only moving supply point in the county. Beatrice created rules before opening the barn. Families with children received food first. Medicine moved before cattle feed. No ranch could take more than 3 days of supplies unless someone remained in immediate danger. Every delivery went into the ledger, not for payment, but so fear would not decide whose name was forgotten. The kitchen became a command room. Women boiled water and packed food. Children filled sacks. Older men repaired harness. Frank controlled the stores. June organized the mule teams. Eli matched drivers to routes. A judge peeled potatoes. A banker cleaned stalls. No one argued about status because the storm had made every life equally fragile. On the 6th day, Beatrice stayed at the ranch and sent June in command of a medicine run. 2 men objected to taking orders from a 17-year-old girl. June tightened the lead harness, looked toward the white road, and said anyone who knows a safer route may take the front. No one moved. She returned before dark with the medicine delivered and every mule sound. Beatrice entered the trip in the ledger beneath June's name, not her own. That mattered. Hale Ranch could not depend on one woman being everywhere at once. The rescue work had a cost. Eli's hands froze during the 3rd long trip. Beatrice warmed them slowly beneath blankets while he cursed and screamed as feeling returned. A mule named Dove broke a leg in a hidden ditch. Beatrice stayed beside the animal until there was nothing more to do, then cut the harness and continued because medicine in the wagon was needed by a child with fever. That night, no one spoke while June cleaned Dove's empty stall. 13 mules remained. On the 7th night, food ran low. Beatrice reduced her own portion. Nell Sims, Marta's 10-year-old daughter, noticed. "You did not eat." "I am not hungry." "That is a lie." Beatrice looked at her. Nell broke her biscuit in half. "Mama says big women need more supper, not less." The room went quiet. Then Beatrice laughed. Soon everyone did. It was the first laughter the storm had allowed that did not belong to cruelty. Calvin Roe arrived at the supply barn before noon the next day. He demanded 12 sacks of grain and enough hay for his breeding herd. "My cattle are worth more than every small farm waiting outside," he said. Beatrice stood between him and the barn. They do not become more alive because they belong to a rich man. Roe stepped closer. Eli and 2 ranch hands moved behind her. Beatrice raised one hand without looking back. No, she did not need men to make the decision for her. Roe looked around at the waiting families. For the first time in years, wealth did not move him to the front. He left furious. That evening, 2 of his hands returned with a wagon and a note bearing his signature. They demanded the same supplies. Beatrice read the note, folded it, and gave it back. 3 sacks. Feed for the milk cows. The older hand glanced toward the barn. "Mr. Roe says the breeding herd comes first." "Mr. Roe is not standing here." The younger man reached for a sack. Eli stepped forward, but Beatrice stopped him. She opened the ledger and pointed to 6 families still waiting. "You may take what the rules allow, or you may return with nothing and explain why pride mattered more than children." The men took 3 sacks. The next morning, a farmer arrived with 1 jar of preserved peaches as payment for flour. Beatrice entered it at its honest value and placed it on the shelf beside Roe's folded demand. Before Roe returned, word came from a settlement beyond the North Draw. 12 families had no fuel. 2 teams had already disappeared on that open ground. Beatrice studied her journal. A pressure fall like the one she had recorded usually brought a brief weakening of the wind before dawn. She expected 4 quiet hours. Eli disagreed. "The temperature is falling too fast. The pressure pattern says the wind will ease." "For how long?" "Long enough." They left at 3 in the morning with 2 sleds of split wood. The lull lasted less than 2 hours. Wind struck the wagon's broadside. 1 sled overturned, spilling wood into a drift. Beatrice ordered the crew to reload it. Eli caught her arm. "We do that, we lose the team. There are children waiting for this fuel. And children behind us waiting for medicine tomorrow." For several seconds, Beatrice hated him for being right. They abandoned half the wood, lashed the remaining load tighter, and brought 2 families back to Hale Ranch. The others shared what arrived. That night, Beatrice wrote the failed forecast into her journal. Beside it, she added 1 sentence. "Ask Eli before risking every team." She never again confused being responsible with being the only person allowed to be right. On the 9th day, Calvin Roe returned. His face had changed. Pride had frozen out of him. "My wife cannot breathe," he said. "I need your animals." Beatrice's anger vanished. "How far?" 11 miles. She selected 6 mules. Roe stared at her. "You are coming? You do not know how to drive them." He lowered his eyes. "No." They left before noon with medicine, hot bricks, blankets, and a small stove lashed into the wagon. Halfway to Roe Ranch, the wagon broke through river ice. 1 mule fell into black water. Roe shouted and hauled the reins. Beatrice struck his hands away. "You will break her neck." The mule thrashed against the broken edge. Beatrice slid into the freezing water, cut the tangled trace, and guided the animal toward solid ice while Roe pulled from the bank. They saved her. The mule lay shivering in the snow. Roe removed his coat and spread it over her without being asked. Beatrice's hands stopped feeling like hands. She ordered him to cut strips from a wagon blanket and wrap her wrists. "You are giving orders on my land now?" he asked, breathless. "You asked for my team." He wrapped the cloth tighter. The harness could not be used. Beatrice rebuilt it with rope while Roe held a lantern beneath his coat. The delay cost almost an hour. When they started again, the rescued mule limped but kept pulling. Roe walked beside her for the remaining miles, one hand on the trace whenever the ground dropped. At Hale Ranch, his children opened the door before the wagon stopped. The youngest girl saw Beatrice's frozen dress and began crying. "My mother is upstairs." Beatrice left the team to Roe and climbed the steps. Mrs. Roe had pneumonia. Her breathing was shallow, her skin hot, and the room had been sealed so tightly against the cold that the air smelled of smoke and sickness. Beatrice opened the inner door for ventilation, heated water, used warm cloths, and kept the woman taking small amounts of fluid. She did not promise a cure. She promised only that she would stay until help came. The county doctor, Matthew Reed, arrived 2 days later after another mule team cleared the southern route. He was a widower from Amarillo with tired eyes and no patience for people who mistook exhaustion for courage. He examined Mrs. Roe first. Then he looked at Beatrice's frozen hem. "Take off your boots. My feet are not the emergency. They become one if you lose them." Beatrice disliked the order and obeyed it. Mrs. Roe survived. Beatrice kept all 10 toes, though 2 remained numb through spring. For 12 days, the mule teams carried food, medicine, letters, firewood, and people through roads no horse team could cross. They brought a baby with fever to the doctor. They carried an old man home after his roof collapsed. They delivered lamp oil to the telegraph station and returned with messages from families beyond the county line. The storm took cattle, fences, roofs, and 1 mule. It did not take a single person whose name entered Beatrice's ledger. When the thaw came, the prairie revealed what snow had hidden. Carcasses lay across the open ground. Fence lines had vanished. Families walked their land without speaking. Some ranches lost half their cattle. Hale Ranch lost less than 1 in 10. The lower losses did not mean Beatrice was safe. The March payment on Nathan's loan was still due, and the storm had emptied shelves she had filled with borrowed money. For 2 days, she sat at the kitchen table with the rescue ledger on one side and the ranch accounts on the other. Families began returning what they could. Marta Sims brought flour. The judge sent a wagon of hay. A German farmer who had received medicine arrived with 3 piglets and refused to take them home. Others had nothing but labor to offer. Beatrice entered every repayment, including the hours spent rebuilding Hale fences. She did not charge anyone for being rescued. She also refused to pretend generosity had no cost. The spring calf buyer reached the ranch after the roads opened. Regional losses had raised prices, and he offered to release her from the old contract so she could sell the calves elsewhere for more money. Beatrice read the paper twice. "You could make more elsewhere," he said. "I gave my word before the storm. You also kept half this county alive. That does not change the contract." The buyer paid the agreed price and added a separate freight fee for the mule teams that would help move his cattle through the damaged roads. Beatrice accepted the fee because it was work, not gratitude disguised as charity. On the morning the bank payment came due, the manager arrived expecting to discuss an extension. Beatrice placed a bank draft, the original loan statement, and her final figures on the desk. He checked the amount twice. "You had no obligation to pay the full balance after a disaster like this. I had a due date." He glanced toward the barn, where June and Eli were repairing harness for the next supply run. "People are saying you saved the county. People say many things after surviving." The manager turned the loan paper around and pointed to the signature line. "Nathan Hale's name is still printed here." Beatrice signed beneath it. "One signature is enough." He stamped the loan paid. For the first time since Nathan's death, Hale Ranch belonged to no bank, no husband's memory, and no man waiting for her to fail. It belonged to the woman who had kept it standing. Calvin Roe stood beside the remains of his breeding herd and wept where no one was meant to see. Beatrice saw him and kept walking. A week later, she offered him 6 young cows on credit. He stared at her across the ledger table. "Why? Your children need milk." "I mocked you. Yes, I tried to buy your ranch. Yes, you should let me fail." Beatrice closed the book. Your family is not a punishment I am entitled to collect." Roe accepted the cattle. He repaid every animal with interest, though Beatrice had not asked. They did not become friends that spring. They learned how to work together without pretending the past had vanished. The thaw also returned every grievance people had postponed during the storm. Several ranchers disputed the supply ledger. One claimed Beatrice had favored families who treated her well. Another insisted Roe received too little grain. A third said his delivery had never arrived. Beatrice opened the books in the church hall and invited anyone to challenge a line. The figures held. Where a count was uncertain, she had marked it uncertain instead of pretending perfection. Calvin Roe stood before the same men who had laughed at the mule sale. "My wife is alive because Mrs. Hale came when I asked," he said. "I was wrong about her. I was wrong about those animals. And I was wrong to think the size of my herd put my family ahead of yours." The apology did not erase the winter. It made cooperation possible. Beatrice proposed a county winter cooperative. Large ranches would contribute more grain and hay. Families without money could contribute labor after the thaw. The church cellar would hold emergency stores. Mule teams would practice every autumn before anyone needed them. Roe offered 2 barns. The bank contributed lamp oil. The judge provided legal papers so no creditor could seize emergency supplies during a crisis. The first autumn drill exposed problems no speech would have found. A bell could not be heard across the North Draw. 2 families had stored grain in damp cellars. A wagon marked ready had no spare axle pin. One driver did not know the route he had volunteered to cover. Beatrice wrote every failure down and assigned someone other than herself to correct it. By the next hard storm, teams were harnessed before snow covered the road. No family waited 12 days to ask for help. The plan worked because people practiced it before pride and panic returned. Matthew Reed began visiting Hale Ranch under the excuse of checking Beatrice's feet. After the 4th visit, she removed 1 boot before he asked. "They healed a month ago," she said. "I know." "Then why are you here?" Matthew looked toward the ledger open on her desk. "The cooperative needs a medical supply list. I thought the woman who crossed a blizzard with half a pharmacy in her wagon might have an opinion. She had several. Their courtship began in arguments over clean water, quinine, bandages, and whether every shelter needed a separate medicine box." Matthew never treated Nathan's name as competition. The first time Beatrice spoke of her husband, Matthew listened without rushing to fill the silence. "I loved him," she said. "I assumed you did. Some men would prefer a widow to pretend otherwise. Some men are easily frightened by a woman who had a life before meeting them." Beatrice studied him. "You are not frightened?" "Frequently, just not by that." 2 years after the storm, Matthew asked her to marry him beside Mercy's stall. Beatrice said yes after making him agree that Hale would remain in the ranch name. Matthew never praised her for being strong. He asked when she was tired and believed the answer. Mercy lived long enough to carry Beatrice to the wedding. Flowers were braided into the old mule's harness. No one laughed. Years later, when Mercy died, Beatrice buried her near the barn. The marker carried no grand speech, only the truth. "Mercy, she brought us home." The county remembered the winter through dead cattle, broken fences, and the 13 remaining mules that kept moving after every horse team stopped. Beatrice remembered something else. She remembered the page in her weather journal where she had crossed out her own prediction and written Eli's warning beside it. She kept that page longer than any newspaper story calling her the Mule Queen. The mules had saved lives because they knew when not to obey a bad command. Beatrice had learned the same lesson. Would you have bought the 14 mules? Or laughed with the crowd? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to Dusty Mercy for a new original Western story every week.